Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We'll get restarted. But what we're going to do is, for this part of the evening, we'll launch the book that we have. I'll tell you a little bit about this gathering and the Mittal Institute, and then we'll hear from our esteemed keynote speaker, and I'll introduce him because I want to do it properly, so I'll wait a minute to do so. But in the first instance, let me invite Rahul to launch this book that is the product of so many years of work, as you've heard.
Thank you. So could I request you to come up just to help us? Yep, you, Kanak, sorry, and Professor Menon too, because Professor Menon has been an inspiration. I was just reminding him how he once said to us that he encouraged us, and this is, I think, what Kaiwan also alluded to, is take on the challenge of writing the history of the present, and that's resonated so deeply. And thank you for it. So we just thought you're the right guy to do this. Yes. It's easy to see who is the most childlike and open the book fast. And who's the most mature. Who is trying to recycle the paper. Come up for some pictures. The publisher should also be. Yes.
I'm so sorry.
She was selling the books. Thank you.
When she said business is business, I was remembering my grandfather who would always say, Nahi Lakshmi, Nahi Saraswati. So you need both together. May I have that? So I just want to say, I know that when I started, I used what some of you thought and Rahul protested was hyperbole about how extraordinary Rahul is and about this conference that was to come up. So for those of you who were not here at the beginning, I'm Hitesh, Hathi. I'm with the Mittal Institute. And as I said at the beginning, it's really a privilege for me to be here and an honor. We have an extraordinary group of people. I've been talking to some of the young architects whose work is up there in that exhibit, to people who have well-established careers and lives and an extraordinary body of work, scholarly or architecturally or otherwise. So it's really an honor to be part of this. As I say, I was not in any way exaggerating. And it's a great honor for the Mittal Institute to be involved with this project. And as I was saying earlier also, Rahul is an old friend from the 90s in our graduate school days, and working with him on these extraordinary projects is one of the great pleasures of the work that I do. So Rahul, I want to thank you also. And initially I thought I would say a few words about the nature of this conference, but it's been laid out so wonderfully, how expansive it is in its thinking, how deep it is. The book that we just launched is itself the product of years of actual specific work and years before that of Rahul's own thinking deeply about these issues in concert with this community. So instead of talking about what's to come, because you've now heard about it, I want to just take one moment and step back and say how extraordinary a gathering this is. We have architects joining us and people joining us from every country in South Asia. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all over India. And, I just want to take a moment and say, that's an amazing thing. We are so fortunate to have had organizers who've managed to make this possible. But for whatever present-day problems there are in this world and in this country, I just want to remind us it's still possible here in this city, in this institution, and with the Mittal institution. And I'm emphasizing this in part because the Mittal institution is still an institution that is committed to the idea of South Asia as a unit. It's not that we are unaware of the fact that there are great divisions of history and politics, that there are borders which are weighted with the burden of those divisions and histories. But we are also dedicated to proceeding in this modern life with an unpartitioned heart. I use this expression because we had Ali Sethi last year singing for us at Harvard, the Pakistani singer and my former student, as it happens. And he looked out at the audience that was very mixed. It was to celebrate 75 years of independence, and with people from all over the subcontinent. And he said, I'm going to sing of an unpartitioned heart. And that's kind of where we are. And one of the reasons I emphasize it is because I want to tell you just for 1 minute about the Mittal Institution. The Mittal Institute is dedicated to working beyond any boundaries in academia. So in a modern academic life, if you're in the chemistry department, you mostly do chemistry and you work in that department. The Mittal Institute is committed to getting people from every part of the university, and we have, from the Graduate School of Design as Rahul, from the law school, from the School of Public Health, from the medical school, from the business school, and every department in the humanities to do work together. Some of the work is specific to those fields. A lot of the work is multidisciplinary. We've done over the years massive studies that have resulted in other books. The Kumbh Mela, we studied it and we brought in people from public health, from data science, from, well, Rahul was there to talk about town planning and architecture, looked at it from all of those administrative practices to produce a work on how this extraordinary festival takes place, where 60 to 120 million people gather, and where, as it turns out, as our healthcare experts found, the incidence of infectious disease can sometimes be lower than it is in other parts of that region in that time. So currently we're doing a very large project on healthcare. It's the largest project on healthcare in the subcontinent. And we've also recently started a new project on climate change, with work on the ground in India and Pakistan, in India and Bangladesh already, and soon to be expanded to Pakistan. I do have a few slides here, and if my technological skills work, I just want to show you. This is, of course, what we're doing today. So that's just a sense of who we are and some of the events we organize. This is our 4th conference this year in India. And of course, we have multiple conferences I see. Is this going to come up one at a time? I just want to pull all of these up. The conferences come as a result of all the joint work that we do with faculty from all over. And they come as a result of working both with young scholars as well as established scholars. And part of the work of the conferences is also to expand and spread best practices within a field. And you're seeing that here, but that's true for all of them. We are now the place where if you are at Harvard or anywhere in the region where there are so many universities and you want to do work in South Asia, this is where you come to. I think I want to move beyond. I'm going to try the arrows. Yeah, there we go. So as you see, we work in all of these countries and have done so at different times. We have major offices in our home offices in Cambridge, a full-fledged office here, office in Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh. That is a sense of what we do. I don't want to take too long here. And the goal here, and this is why I wanted to get to that write-up, the goal here is to connect scholarship at Harvard to South Asia and South Asia to Harvard. And the idea is not that all the knowledge exists at Harvard and somehow we're bringing it to South Asia. The idea is radically the other way. is to collect bodies of knowledge and communities of knowledge in both places and have them share what they know. Because in fact, Harvard and MIT and Brown and Yale and Princeton and other institutions that we work with and Stanford have as much to learn from you as they have to teach anyone. And that's why I'm very moved to have you. We haven't before connected with such a large community of people interested in architecture. And I want to say, and I wanted to talk about this, to extend an invitation to you. Any of you who are thinking of projects that are interesting, that could maybe work with institutions or benefit from academic or cultural or other resources that we can provide, we would love to hear from you because that's what we're here for. And I know we have 100+ people online, and I should have said hello to you online also. Please, the same invitation is extended to you. And basically, it's building a community. That is a sense of the staff we have. And I think I've gone through most of the rest. We will be doing a major conference on climate change again in India in June of this coming year. So please join us for those. Some of the work that we're doing, and I'll just mention it, we are actually doing a large amount of work on art restoration, which includes actual work and training of best practices. We're doing work on the ground, teaching science to kids in the region. We have a wide range of fellows, and so those of you who would like to work with us and have projects that would benefit from the academic resources at Harvard University, please look us up on the website. We would like to hear from you, and please apply for one of the fellowships that we offer. And you'll see that the range of fellowships is quite great. Just general pictures. Sorry, there are so many of me. I think somehow people think they should have them, but that's really all I wanted to say about the Mittal Institute. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me. Rahul has already thanked everyone who has helped put the conference together. I want to just step back and just say, both to Rahul's team and our team at the Mittal, it's been an extraordinary amount of work. As Mies van der Rohe, I think, said, God is in the details, and the details have really mostly worked out. So thank you, Mittal team. Thank you, Rahul, and your team. And with that, let me just move to the main event, which is our keynote today. I will give a short introduction so we can save more time to hear our speaker. And if there's time at the end, we'd like to take a few questions. So let me introduce Kanak Dixit. Mr. Dixit is a writer, a journalist, a civil rights and democracy activist. He's a campaigner for open urban spaces. He's active in the conservation of the built heritage. He helped revive Nepal's only public bus company, is involved in applying the concept of public transportation to the valley. He's a longtime trekker. He writes on travel and other related themes. He also heads the main archives of the Nepali language, the Madan Puraskar Pustakale. He's active in developing South Asian regionalism, and he once suffered from a fall while trekking in 2001, and after that he helped start the Spinal Injury Rehabilitation Center. He's dedicated to the power of nonfiction film and has started and heads the Film South Asia Festival of Documentaries. He's a translator and author of political commentary, author of popular books for children, and he has had multiple awards. I might just mention one, which is the Prince Class Award of the Netherlands. All of his writings are archived and online, and you can find them. And so without much further ado, Kanak Dixit, Mr. Dixit, please join us. It's an honor to listen to you.
There's an article in Access in the title, An Elusive Search for South Asian Architecture. ये बंद कर देना, वो पहला वो मैप रख देना. So to get started, Vaijayanti Rao earlier from this lectern said she might be the only non-architect in the room. Well, Vaijayanti, there is one more than you. And Rahul and the team has put before you a children's author, a journalist, an activist from Kathmandu. The only thing I might have the capacity to speak in front of you would be the idea of South Asia. So, caveat emptor. This space itself, the India International Center, holds a lot of meaning for me because it is historical and it's archaeological and it's also architecturally historical. This is part of the former Lodi necropolis, this area, and of course the design by Joseph Stein has stood the test of time. Although this building itself was not his doing, but the rest of the complex on the other side is. So it's a great place to be talking about architecture because you have to have a mix of history and art in talking, and the soil also should speak to you. So, an elusive search for South Asian architecture. I start with appreciation for the conference's commitment to, as the concept note by Rahul indicates, quote, nurturing the idea of South Asia and its relevance to the practitioners of the region. This is a time when subcontinental regionalism has been put to the test, and cultural connectivities and historical legacies, including in architecture and design, are being separated by present-day borders. The philosophy, if you will, of South Asia, I would almost like to call it the ideology of South Asia, given that it might require an ideology beyond a philosophy, is that ultimately it is not a quest for a super region of the world. The history and the demography of South Asia denies such an evolution. It is the search for social justice, and the centralized nation states of these humongous nation states, particularly 2 to 3 largest ones, just will not reach into the genius of the people. And nor will architects be able to show their genius when you're trying to reach out to essentially what is a 1/4 of the world's population divided by nationalist certitudes. So, Westphalian states and ultranationalisms, now buttressed with faith-based certitudes, i.e. religion, have silently been ripping us apart. This takes us away from our cultural underpinnings of the past, while it also keeps us from collaborating at the present or for the future. This should be heart-stopping, including for architects. But we are too preoccupied otherwise in so many disciplines. In the case of architects, they seem to, or you seem to have found escape in building for individuals, residences, rather than challenge what the powerful force upon the public. The separation of frontiers means that architectural streams of South Asia, if you look cross-border frontiers, because there are frontiers within the countries of South Asia as well, for sure. But the separation of frontiers means that architectural streams of South Asia, the design as well as the aesthetics, are being separated not only between India and Pakistan, but also with respect to the other countries. The further we get from partition, the less connections there are across families, clans, colleagues, and professions. I was with a family from Nainital, but with deep linkages to Colombo, Sri Lanka, 3 nights ago. And the kind of interconnections we talked about cannot happen with the next generation. We can, of course, meet across families, clans, colleagues, and professions. And as far as professions are concerned, we can, of course, meet in Dubai. But that is not the same as meeting in Kolkata or Kathmandu. Place has meaning. When a celebrated urban planner gets ill in one city of South Asia, in one city of one country of South Asia, or an architect leaves this world in another country, there is very little reverberation across borders. This would not have been the case pre-1947. In 2022, when Pakistan reeled in one of the worst flood disasters of the modern era of the globe, not of South Asia, who was listening elsewhere? Salimul Haq, the global missionary on climate crisis, an expert, died on 28 October. Had we been less divided in South Asia, we would have talked about it more, about his passing more. We all would have regarded him as our own. But today, we regard him as a Bangladeshi who passed away. Whereas in the modern era, in the pre-47 era, we might even be saying, oh, an Indian has passed away. But given that India, the term has been taken by a nation state, that is India, which is also apparently Bharat, we need to come up with a new terminology. So we have to say a fellow South Asian, Salimul Haq, has passed away. Because as I said, India is taken. While we're being made to forget, we're also prevented from cooperating, from the sheer inability to meet in person. And in this particular conference, for example, participants from Pakistan are having to Zoom with others of us gathered here in Delhi. Online possibilities have not really worked. And this much I can say from experience. We thought it would work. We thought online would make everything much more efficient and that these borders that have been foisted on us would become softer, if not open. But that hasn't happened because there are other forces at play. Online possibilities have not really worked. Sister cities of Amritsar and Lahore may want to connect across the 50 kilometers that separates them, but Islamabad and New Delhi do not want it to happen. Can the architects of Amritsar and the architects of Lahore collaborate? That itself would be a test case to see the future that we want to create. And talking of Lahore and Amritsar, I will show a video in a few minutes. Even to conceptualize a conference on any theme with South Asia on its title has now become an act of independence, of courage, of defiance even. Because the term South Asia is being regarded by I almost wanted to say Neanderthalic people, but that would be an injustice to the Neanderthals. So I would say some people regard talking of South Asia as an attack on the nation state. And so amongst us, the scholars of South Asia, the great minds who speak on geopolitics and geostrategic confabulations, and will they talk about South Asia? No, because they fear the trolling, which is why I'm excessively gratified to be attending a conference that has South Asia in its title without being done by geostrategists or political scientists or international affairs people. Because that category, by and large, there are exceptions, but that category tends to be statist. Even when they say South Asia, they speak as an Indian or a Nepali or a Pakistani or a Sri Lankan. But I know here, when we say South Asia, we're not talking as an Indian architect. At best, we might be talking as a New Delhi architect or a Kolkata architect or a Dhaka architect. That is the difference. It is the perspective, the South Asian perspective that we all need to have. And such conferences should happen not only among the students of international affairs and geopolitics. In fact, those fields are very statist, as I said. Here we have a conference on South Asian architecture. We also need conferences outside of government control and guidance on climate crisis, investment, publishing, waterways, communicable diseases, public transport, disabilities, conservation, as the word I learned from this conference, repair, and the South Asian brown cloud. Now, the fact that most of us don't know what the South Asian brown cloud is. It is black carbon. It is created by the coal burning industries of Punjab, Haryana, and the NCR region, Western UP, some parts of Sindh and Rajasthan. The dust goes up, the detritus burning goes up, makes a layer at 14,000 feet, 15,000 feet. And the westerlies, except for the monsoon months, push it westward. And the glaciers are retreating, not so much because of climate change, but because of the albedo effect on the snows. Now, this is what is a South Asian topic. But is it being discussed by the diplomats of Nepal, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, because all are affected, and Bhutan? No. And Tibet? No. So that's why we need South Asian regionalism. Let me say now, for now, that the architects are showing the way with this conference, the way to South Asia. Because South Asian conclaves have dried up. We are all in South Asia, but we are closeted. Which brings me to describe the map, which is an effort by the editors of Himal, South Asian magazine, to force us to shed our preconceptions and imagine a South Asia that is less capital city-centric, not a unified South Asia, but a multiplicity of spaces within the subcontinent, a welling up of localism rather than the separating shroud of citizenship and nationalisms. I'll now take you on a personalized tour of South Asia. I cannot claim theoretical nor practical knowledge of architecture and design, nor can I wax philosophical. However, I do look for what I think is personally likable and dislikable, with all the dangers of doing so. So, anecdotally, and without trying to be representative, let me take you on a tour of the cities and countrysides, plural, of South Asia, which I have been fortunate to visit since late September 2023. Kathmandu, Biratnagar, Chennai, Amritsar, Lahore, Dhaka, and Delhi. In Dhaka, I found uniquely fine workmanship of public and private buildings, from flyovers and overpasses to brickwork of individual buildings. Some say it is the influence of nearby Singapore. But one successful architect suggested to me that as much as he knew of the northern half of India, the quality suffers on that side of the border because of contractor corruption. He said excessive contractor corruption. Because I have seen this to be true in that when you land in Dhaka and you take the bypass into the city, when you go through, you see some subtle difference in the finish. The buildings, as I'll come to later, tend to be this more or less the same design, but the finish suffers nearly everywhere, from government school buildings in Nepali villages built after the earthquake of 2015 to the elevated railway station of Chennai. That is a classic, just to look at that building and grieve the lack of attention to finish. Sri Lanka, of course, is Bawa country. And in Geoffrey Bawa's Lunuganga estate, his homes, resorts, and other edifices, there is a signature that has gone national, more than of architects, celebrated architects elsewhere. But in Sri Lanka too, the urban oneness is taking over. I can tell you from recent observation, and if you will believe me, that the high-rise skylines of the fort area of Colombo, NCR's Gurgaon, Dhaka's Gulshan neighborhood could be interchanged, and you wouldn't know the difference. I will not refer to individual residences where design elements and pleasantness can be found more than elsewhere. I therefore seek sparks of design sensibility in factories and in public buildings, and I have found them in Dhaka and outside Lahore in September and October. I found them in the facades of the rice mills of Pakistani Punjab. For some reason, and I didn't have time to ask why, but why is there a particular design, a particular aesthetic? And this is not one rice mill, but many in the 3 hours I drove from Lahore to Harappa. And then there is this particular term that the garment industry in Bangladesh uses, compliance. After the great Rana Plaza building collapse of April 2013, and a lot of demands regarding worker rights, child abuse, etc. And one reason that Bangladesh's garment industry has surged ahead of the rest of South Asia is because the industry became alert and their buildings became compliant, quote unquote. So whenever you see a lovely building, for example, going out of north of Dhaka into Mirpur, and you say, how come that building is so well built? Oh, they say, no, that's because that's a compliant building. So the term compliant has entered the lexicon. The property is still, in Biratnagar in southwest Nepal, there is a huge jute mill called the Biratnagar Jute Mill that died decades ago. The property is still intact, and the factory buildings from 90 years ago stand proud and cry for repurposing. So this is my sense of looking not at individual buildings, but trying to look at public spaces, because the public deserves more than it's getting. I would also suggest a study of contrasts. From the great collection of the red brick Lahore Museum, built in 1894 and designed by, who was Rai Bahadur, Gangaram, it is a museum and a collection in status. And then you can compare it to the Malla era palace, converted to the Patan Museum in Kathmandu Valley, designed by Austrian conservation architect Götz Hagmüller and his friends. Among modern day monuments, if you asked me to choose, I would go for the Shahid Gate of Kathmandu, rather than the columns of Shahid Minar in Dhaka, or the Minar-e-Pakistan of Lahore, without prejudice to any and all sentiment. On the whole, the cities of South Asia are tilting towards sameness. The same airport concourses with high ceilings, and some architect over tea later or drinks later, I hope there are drinks, will explain to me why the airport concourses have to be so high. And Pokhara has just recently, central Nepal, got a copy-paste airport design from some Chinese airport somewhere, and doesn't do justice at all to the great Annapurna panorama. The airport actually looks away, whereas the tiny former airport, which was active till a year ago, did full justice to the Himalayan panorama of the Annapurnas. The same airport complexes with high ceilings, the same malls, similar lobbies of hotels, large and small, identical multiplexes. My own valley today has only one remaining Art Deco cinema house of the 5 that came up in the mid-1960s. Having taken you a tour of South Asia, I'll focus on the Nepal Valley. But first, a video. Shall I just click this? So this is going across from me as a Nepali with a Nepali passport, have a privilege that a Pakistani or an Indian does not normally get. Yes. So this is crossing over from the Indian side, that the border security force decal. That's the amphitheater, very Romanesque on the Indian side, to watch that terrible beating the retreat show. That's BSF, Border Security Force. And it's very pleasant actually, but it's also very alone, very lonely, because nobody is crossing across this huge 2 countries. And look at the border point. The people don't even really know how to look at a passport because they don't have to. They're searching for the visa to Pakistan. That's a 400-foot flagstaff on both sides, identical. And this is being allowed now to cross over onto the Pakistan side, the Lahore side, from the Amritsar side, Atari into Wagah. Border Security Force, that's the range, Pakistani Rangers, that's a tout. I said, no, please, no, thank you. And then the Pakistani gentleman who also asked me later, is Nepal actually an independent, separate country? And then that's looking back to India. And now turning back again into Pakistan, Lahore. This should be, this view and this crossing should be the cacophony of a South Asian bazaar. And all other architecture and cultural elements that come with a bazaar. Uh, I miss the cacophony of the marketplace. It is empty airline terminals going from one to the other. And surprisingly, the people are very pleasant because they have nothing to do. And that is a big tragedy. Just like the biggest tragedy of South Asia, but looking very pretty, is if you're flying over from Pakistan into Nepal, into India at 39,000 feet, after you cross Lahore, you see a beautiful sight from on high, especially looking southwards toward the Thar Desert. A necklace goes into the deep into the horizon. But that is the concertina wired frontier with halogen lamps and guard dogs and trails along on both sides. And the only thing that's good there in a film that was made a decade ago was a dog that could do what I could do, go across with ease. And this canine knew what was the feeding time in Pakistan by the Rangers and the BSF. So on the other side, he was called Tiger, and on the Indian side, he was known as Raju. So we all need to become Rajus and Tigers. Now to move on to Nepal Valley, let me now turn to the place I know best, which has transformed not in my lifetime, but in my adulthood. The place is Nepal Valley, improperly known as Kathmandu Valley. And my theme would be that we might have been what we might have been, but what we did not become. By rights, this bowl of 15 by 20 miles at 3,500 feet average level should be called by its indigenous name, which is Soniga. That is 3 towns. Given that Nepal was not colonized, we do not have boulevards in parts of the city, no tree-lined lanes, no dark bungalows, no public transport worth the name, the planned urban spaces that some cities of colonized South Asia have, where the extremes between, on the other hand, where the extremes between the haves and the have-nots are not so starkly visible because they are separated. In Nepal's capital valley, the new spaces, besides the new spaces, on the new spaces outside the old cities, the spaces are all uniformly awful, that you would not really distinguish between rich and poor neighborhoods. Hence, the Valley of Nepal is an ideal place to understand what would have happened elsewhere in colonized South Asia in the modern era in the absence of colonization. And the answer is ruination. For the urban sprawl has spread to the edges of the valley, eating up the rice paddies that ensured prosperity in the historical past. And now land plotting is going up the mountainsides all around the valley. Such is the pressures for land, and such is the pressure on this valley. Plotting, quote unquote, is now part of the Nepali lexicon and the Nepali language. For long, I used to say that we must prevent the Muzaffarpurization of the valley, but I spoke too soon. We have outdone Muzaffarpur, and a Muzaffarpur citizen would most likely be horrified to see the Nepal Valley. And we have done it through all systems of government. During the royal autocracy, it has happened during this whole period of royal autocracy to constitutional monarchy to the present day republic. The valley townships made creative use of brick, mud, tile, and wood. Very little rock. And what we have done as part of the Kathmandu Valley Preservation Trust, of which Rohit Ranjitkar is the director, who's here in the audience, what we have done with the Kathmandu Valley Preservation Trust, of which I'm proud to be associated, is to bring back the temples and palaces of Patan after 2015 earthquake. But the rest of the valley, urbanscape, the modern urbanscape is simply a kudita over the rice paddies by cement and concrete and conversion of the old skyline of tile roofs. The urban planning was done by brick kiln operators. How? The roads of the expanded valley urbanism are the tracks used by trucks to bring the bricks to market. and they became the arteries for the urban expansion of Kathmandu Valley. Such is the planning we've got. We have unique, perhaps this unique element is not specific to Nepal. The concrete pillar left on top of the roof for a future additional floor. That is a South Asian signature. And the future never came. Then there are the Namaste buildings all over the mountain hill and Tarai plain of Nepal. An architect about 15, 20 years ago thought of putting a triangular notch, a vertical notch, on the cement parapet around the roof, and now it is all the rage. Nepal's contribution to building design. The Namaste house. The Bagmati River long ago sacrificed her sand to the concretization of the valley, and now she runs deep within a concrete canyon of clay. Kathmandu's malls are generic and do not tend to local specificities. The chill of air conditioning is a South Asia-wide phenomenon, where one feels relief upon exiting a building. Have always wondered why in Kathmandu or elsewhere we cannot have buildings with airflow rather than air conditioning where the climate allows it. In this sense, Nepal is no different from anywhere else in South Asia. The urban spaces are being overrun by structures that lack sub-regional specificities. A mall or cineplex in Kathmandu or Guwahati is no different from one in Karachi, except in my experience, one mall in my neighborhood in Patan, it is called the Labim Mall. And I will not say more on that. Outside the valley, things are no better. There is disappearance of forest elements in the architecture, no more wood slats, shingles, frames, beams, walls, and floors, leading to a loss of forest culture itself. When one smells a wood fire in Nepal these days, there is such a sense of longing and loss. The hilltops are adorned with statues and view towers. There is an explosion of roads being designed by backhoe and dozer operators, just youngsters. Examples abound of the comfort of dwellings evolved over centuries in terms of livability, scale, internal climate, utility in the high valleys, mid-hills, and the plains, to suddenly be discarded for rods and cement and corrugated roofing. There is saving of cost and efficiency in replacing the roof with concrete, but could it have been done differently? Meanwhile, there is a massive abandonment of villages to roadhead towns all over Nepal. And the dislocation from traditional homes to mud plaster and wood into cold cement is a process that is going all over. And I believe the sociological phenomena of the psychosocial distraction experienced by individuals in the tens of thousands and the lakhs when they move from a traditional house to a cement floor. I don't think that has been studied enough. The question for the architect or planner is, why has it not caught on? That the kind of great buildings that are proposed. And there are such great examples out there in the panels in this conference as well. There is one surefire way for something to catch on, and that is not comfort nor aesthetics, but income. This may not apply to all aspects, but this is when it comes to saving buildings in old towns, in touristic areas, this seems to be one answer, which will not actually answer the challenge of urban buildings coming down elsewhere rather than being repaired. Income, not incremental income, but exponential income increase. For decades, we tried to save the old town houses of Patan in the bahas and the bahis, that means the courtyards. And there were few takers. That changed when, in the neighborhood known as Sotha, the tourist arrivals started paying from not $20 a night, but $70 a night. That led to preservation and repair, but also new buildings that continued somewhat with the old aesthetics. Can you get this out of the screen there and put back my little map? I'm coming towards the end now. Gigantism and populism. I dare say all over South Asia, political populism and corruption is giving us gigantism. It is hard to get politicians and supplicant bureaucrats to concentrate in preserving, tweaking, repairing, repurposing, retrofitting. They would rather destroy and build something ugly
that too with poor finish. When the April 2015 building weakened the main facade of Singhdarbar, the Rana era building that is the seat of the government of Nepal, it was all that we could do to fight the political bureaucratic masters to save that facade, that building. Its renovation and retrofitting is now coming into conclusion. When we sought to save the Sheetal Nivas presidential palace, the Secretary of the Housing Ministry tried to blackmail us by saying that we would be responsible for the death of the head of state, the president, if she died during the next earthquake. As we have found out again and again, contractor corruption requires bringing down buildings to put up new ones, with no thought to repair and maintenance. The best example, perhaps, I come to a different country, so I have to couch my words with a perhaps. India's new triangular parliament building to replace the beloved old circle, which has come into news as of yesterday. And the rush to construction seems to have delivered a building where there are questions ranging from airflow to entry-exit points to absence of confabulation places. Plus, if I might add this element right at the end, plus a mural, a controversial mural that incorporates territories of neighboring countries as under Bharat. But let's go around the subcontinent looking at other legislative buildings. In Colombo, one of the few words of criticism we hear of Geoffrey Bawa is that he designed a parliament building that is more of a resort, which detracts from discussions on statecraft. Louis Khan's Jatiyo Sansad Bhavan, ordered built by Ayub Khan in pre-Pakistani partition era, represents, in my mind, Pakistani militarism rather than the Bangla ethos. My hope has been that the appreciation of that facade of the Khan Sansad Bhavan with its triangles and interrupted circles would grow on me, but it hasn't. Nepal's parliament building project, currently under progress, besides the fact that it eats into the little open space left within Kathmandu city, was divided into petty parcels to appease the circle of contractors in cahoots, which meant that a holistic design has gone missing. I could go for about an hour about that particular aspect, but we're talking about patronizing of public projects, and this is what we tend to get when the politically powerful in cahoot with a bureaucrat or a bureaucrat who's more of a supplicant. This is what we get. So where do we go? It's a question that I cannot really find an answer in terms of patronage. The demands of modern day politics has everyone going for gigantism, from the village to national capitals. In the villages of Nepal, the newly empowered local governments under the new constitution of 2015 are concentrating their energies in constructing concrete gates at village entrances. View towers on top of already geologically elevated mountains, or competing to create ever taller statues to survey the land. The Buddha, Sakyamuni, the Bodhisattva, Guru Rinpoche, or the favorite, Lord Shiva. And they just have to become, one has to be taller than the next. And so we are actually eating up hilltops, which could be great sources of income. Because as a German architect friend told me, the hilltops of Nepal, Thumkas as they are known, are the beaches of Sri Lanka. Yet we are hijacking these hilltops, and once you put a god up there, you can't really get rid of him or her. That's a problem. Unlike smaller statues of the past made of cut stone and even stucco, these are all poured concrete. If you go to Muktinath, which also Mr. Modi went and Prime Minister Modi went and made it popular for Indian tourists, between the tiered temple and a Garbhagriha on the side, there some NRN, meaning non-resident Nepali, has poured money, and there's a huge black concrete Buddha in between. So there is no spiritualism there, only selfies in Muktinath. The demands of modern day politics has everyone going for I got that. There are great structures that are required to be built, and their size is the result of the practical requirements. I will just speak a paragraph on infrastructure, such as the Bangabandhu Setu over the Jamuna, that is Brahmaputra, or the newly built Padma Bridge over the Ganga. This is in Bangladesh. But elsewhere, grandiosity also spells disaster. So a great infrastructure project also brings in tourists. They want to look at a huge barrage or a tall dam. But what are we doing? What are the aesthetics and what is the practicalities? Listen to this. There has not been questions enough raised now about what the Farakka barrage did to downstream communities in Bangladesh. Gigantism and populism are pushing forward bigger hydropower and road infrastructure across the Himalaya. But this is not a new thing. One of the most disruptive infrastructural interventions made in South Asia has been the Kosi Barrage and its embankments, which have jacketed the biggest tributary of the Ganga. So much so that the river now runs 12 to 15 meters above the outlying land, which leads into Bihar because of accumulated silt over 7 decades. And so, watching the expanse of the barrage and the levees going upstream and downstream, few think of what is in the offing. You could think of 1,000,000 dead if there is a cloud burst, which is again an misunderstood or understood Himalayan phenomena. A massive cloud burst and a breach of the Kosi embankment where the river can never come back because it'll have to go uphill and also breach an embankment to come back. It is this is a topic, I went slightly off topic only to suggest infrastructure is the next step from architecture, something to be thought about. Now I come to my last section and a page. Craftsmanship and patronage. In the not so recent past, craftsmanship joined the creator to the consumer, whether it is the village builder, blacksmith, leather worker, or the dressmaker. Today, that link is broken with mass-produced items and the loss of the personal touch, be it a building's design or that of a bed or bench. Crafts have become the stuff of urban fashion rather than rural utility. Just as crafts have become neutralized, so has the importance of finish been forgotten. This loss of craft for the mass public, in terms of the mass public, and privileging of craft boutiques everywhere, and with the neglect of finish, whether in the product of buildings or buildings, is seen all over South Asia from Colombo to Kathmandu. Again, I go to the psychosocial impact. What could it be when the handheld craft, where every user knows this was made by so and so or by such and such a community, and to feel it in your fingers and to know everything is now plasticky? Is there something about human evolution that is lost in the process? I'm sure there are scholarships on this, but I haven't read them. One conclusion I have is that I have reached is that from this presentation is architecture, if not the architects themselves, are part of the force that is promoting sameness in South Asia, not reflecting the reality of the most dense yet diverse region in the world, hosting a fourth of the global population of intense variety. Such intense variety, but such sameness. How could it be? And we are not learning from each other where we should, and architecture books are not good enough for the transfer of knowledge, techniques, aesthetics, and appreciation. On the other hand, let me also say, despite the closed borders, the sameness is all pervasive not because there is borrowing going on, in fact, there is not, but because of dictates perhaps of material, concrete, corrugated roofing, cement, and iron rods. It's just the easy way to go. My second conclusion, there is an inability everywhere in South Asia to go to scale. We have a Bawa, a Corbusier, a Stein, a Doshi, and 100 other great architects, but their edifices are few and far in between when you talk about the scale of South Asia. Remember, we're talking about a fourth of the world's population and the two of the largest countries in the globe, India being, of course, the most populated. And so the great buildings and structures that we see outside, what is it that is required for them to be picked up? I have no answer, but to be picked up at a mass scale. Because I am proud to be part of the organization featured in page 55, and I was happy to see it right here.
This is the Madan Puraskar Pustakalaya, and it's a great building of rammed earth and bamboo built by Abari and Nripal Adhikari. We are proud and happy in it. But since it was built after the earthquake, 2015, it was completed, I think, late 2016. I do not know of there are lots of architecture students come by, and a lot of people looking for the aesthetics of local materials. But it has not gone into, if I might use the word, production. So the question I leave you with in the end is, why has it not gone? So there is an inability everywhere that the Bauers and the Corbusier, Steins and Doshis and 100 other architects, but the edifices are fewer and far in between in the context of the size of South Asia and the diversity of South Asia. Architecture has not breached the great wall of privilege, so that there is something that can be owned, appreciated, and emulated by the public at large, which the citizens, common citizens, if you will, seek efficiency, low costs, and aesthetics. They do seek aesthetics. Architecture has not, it seems, to have touched the lives of people at large. Why should aesthetics and design not be the right of a common person, common citizen, whether in the urban mohalla or the village setting? Why have cute examples not caught on? Because they have not. If the architects and builders are giving what the public demands, does the public know enough to demand any better? So the saying goes. Whose job it is to provide that indication to the public? Can it be said that economic growth and prosperity will ipso facto lead to fine design and architecture? In which case, to disprove the point, all we have to do is to look at the Ambani building looming above the shanties of Bombay. I know that Rahul Mehrotra is keen during this conference, the impresario amongst us, to explore the subject of patronship for the future. I do not know if I have a clue as to the answer. The well-to-do will always do well by themselves and order great art and architecture and bring on fine musicians and artists and fine buildings for themselves. My interest is in what the public sees and uses. I just do not trust the people in power in each country of South Asia, as things stand, to use their access to money, contracts, assignments to approach architects to build sensitive structures. And I rest my case by mentioning the parliament buildings, not just the triangle in Delhi, but monstrosities elsewhere as well. They will want, the powerful political leaders will want grandiosity and more grandiosity and some kickbacks on the side. What I would personally seek is example of fine living spaces, personal or public, for those in the urban shanties and villages, spaces that are practical, cheap, climatologically appropriate, aesthetically pleasing. And with such models, let 1,000 flowers bloom, let tens of millions, not thousands, not lakhs, tens of millions benefit. We are a fourth of the planet here in South Asia. And one final sentence, I sincerely believe that all over South Asia, the architects of today are not really being heard by those who commission public buildings and housing and infrastructure. Let us try and understand why this is so. Thank you.
Mr. Dixit, thank you so much. So much to learn and digest in a region which prides itself on its diversity, on its regionality, the sad persistence of similarity when it comes to the issues. And then you've asked some very important questions, but I want to throw it open to the audience. Mr. Dixit agreed to take a few questions. I know that I'm keeping you between dinner and late evening appointments, but it would be wonderful to have a few moments to discuss what Mr. Dixit had to say. So anyone, we also have a Zoom question. While you're pondering, let me start with a Zoom question. How do we as a society of architects and as a society ensure to promote the traditional building crafts and the artisans who are involved. Often they find themselves in poverty and have to shift to other professions that pay. They are saddened by the loss of wisdom, but they have to stay financially afloat.
Unless it's a region that attracts tourists that appreciate traditional, I would not suggest it is practical to go build back exactly as the ancestors built and lived in, because there are new materials, there are new means of comfort, and so I think there's a compromise to be made. And most importantly, I feel what we must look for beyond external design is internal comfort within the spaces. And one example I'll give you simply is when I have looked at the UNESCO certified roofs, tile roofs of Bern in Switzerland, and I say, wow, and Kathmandu had it till so recently ago. But then you come to Kathmandu and you talk to the people who brought down those buildings and made flat roofs. They want the sunlight. They want to dry their rice crop on the roof. Also because the ground no longer gets the sun because of the tilt of the winter sun, that the tall buildings have obviated that. So I would say my first choice would be comfort for the public, and secondly, the external outlook. But if both came together, that would be the best.
Thank you. Vishal,
Yeah, thank you so much for a great talk.
please say who you are.
My name is Vishal Khandelwal, and I'm a faculty member in the History of Art and Architecture department at Harvard. And I'm also one of the moderators for a couple of the sessions tomorrow. I'm so interested in this map that we saw, and I just wanted to know, why you chose it, what's the perspective of the region that you're visualizing here, and how it relates to your talk a bit. So if you'd like to maybe...
Yeah, because this is about South Asia, so
Yes.
I'm happy to expand on that. And what you said earlier, Hitesh said earlier, maybe that explains it a bit. I was editor of Himal when we created this map, and it may be the child in me and my colleagues to do something. In Nepali, the word is utpatang, meaning something in pleasant excess. But the reason it's written in there, but I can't read it for you right now, but you can download this map also, and you can print it, and you may or may not want to exhibit it depending on which country and city you are in. When we printed this 15 years ago and we exhibited it at the Delhi Book Fair, we were forced by the public and organizers to pull it down. Whereas I know that if I go to Sri Lanka, they love it, especially the people from the village of Matara, which is right on top of page, which is south, right? That is how it is. But the reason to do it, as the small explainer there says, is that South Asia is so in such deep, it doesn't say it there, but it's in such deep shit, frankly, that the governance system is very colonial in each country, very top down, and the borders have been, as I suggested, closed up. So we can't take advantage of our historicity to plan our future. We also can't talk about true federalism because that's going to be anti-national. Especially it's getting more anti-national by the day to say federalism. The scholars are not studying it, and we are journalists. So when we as journalists have been following South Asia, me and my colleagues like Onohita Mojumdar, current editor, Roman Gautam, editors that go back about 2.5 decades, we felt as editors, we must also make a point besides the copy that we edit all the time with what I call a South Asian sensibility. And that's why I suggest when you carry on the South Asian sensibility, there are little elements that pop up at you. For example, it'll be very difficult from henceforth, perhaps for some of you to say, oh, he's an Indian architect and he's a Pakistani architect. No, she is a Karachi-based architect and he is an architect from Bangalore. To me, that gives you the vibes of South Asia that we must start with to start again the process of pushing back. So the map is just to shock and to excite and ask people to question their certitudes, including one that north must be top of page, because north can easily, because we're in the universe, we're in a globe in the middle of enormous spaces. This could also be north.
Thank you.
It's also worth pointing out that Ottoman era maps actually had this orientation. So what we see is as north and up was always the opposite for them. So if you look at maps from the Ottoman Empire in the 1560s,
if I may, I should also add that this map was done by Subhas Rai, the artist, and what he had to do, because this is also a spoof of the National Geographic map. So it's the same coloring, you notice, right? So he had to turn the right side up. It's not upside down, by the way. He had to turn right side up every name in there. So it took him 3 months to do this.
So I saw a couple of hands up in the back. Please say who you are and ask.
My name is Sarovar Zaidi, and I teach in the Jindal School of Art and Architecture, but I'm not an architect. Thank you for your talk. It's probably the most radical talk I've ever heard in an architecture forum. I wanted to ask you, I don't know if it's a question or it's a rhetorical point. Would you say that the last 35th or maybe post-colonial era of architecture in South Asia and planning has been an architecture of destruction and demolition, all the way from, I mean, I start counting from Babri, I guess, or maybe the partition, all the way to the forms of destruction and demolition that have gone on in Delhi, in different parts of the country, and the new forms that emerge as part of what is architecture, then is based on a premise which destroys a lot.
I don't know enough to answer your question. I could answer on the side, so to speak, sideways, to say that I think firstly the destruction is accelerating now. And not just in India under the Prime Ministership of Mr. Modi and the rule of BJP, backed by the RSS, but elsewhere too. The processes of, as I said, gigantism goes back, for example, in infrastructure, it went back to the time of Nehru. So in that sense, it has been there since the past, and also everybody also, if possible, will try to stamp something with their rule. In the southeast plains of Nepal, there is a huge structure in the middle of the plain, and in 50 years' time, it may have some use, but right now, it doesn't look like this building is going to be useful. But our ex-Prime Minister, Mr. K.P. Oli, built it. Grandiosity to prove that I am the macho guy in this one, almost phallic structures up there. But I would say that there seems to be an acceleration. It's best I can answer your question right now. And the examples abound, but I might just mention, because my family has links to Banaras, because we became Dixits in Banaras. We are hillbilly acharyas. And Banaras now has this, you've got a Vista project in Delhi, you've got a Vista in Banaras also. And I know that the house owners of the mohallas were paid very well. I gather way above market prices. And so many of them were happy to go. But the raising of shrines and this creation of this so-called modern way, and you were talking earlier, I think it was Mr. Menon, the world class of India, a world-class city, Banaras is that. You don't modernize Banaras with a Vista project. So I think these are excesses that are probably now everybody else is going to learn. And things are changing, not just structures. For example, there's something known as the Ganga Arati from Haridwar. I don't even know if it is original to Haridwar, but the Ganga Arati now goes to Banaras, and now it's all over the hills of Nepal, right? Including Pashupatinath, where the Shivaji inside may not be appreciating it, but he can't tell us.
Shall we take a couple of more questions? I know that it's getting late. Yes.
Can
Oh, Please, and then we'll come to you, sir, after that.
I'm Ishita Shah. I'm an independent researcher and practitioner. I represent a collective called Curating for Culture. Thank you so much for this conversation. I have a very naive question because you didn't expand much on the thought that technology in the last few years has not helped. Because from a personal experience, so much that I right now know, I mean, a little that I know about South Asia and South Asian overlaps is because what we were able to pull off, knowing that the borders are not going to allow us. And that's something that's not in our hands to change. So what we could work across different archives, especially as contemporaries in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, even Bangladesh, is because of technology. So why did you say that that's not working?
Because there is information, I think, a complicated question to try and answer, because I said it and I didn't mull over it for long. But I would say this, there's enough opportunity to gather information. And that is true of the internet. You can go anywhere and get anything you want. But to do something about it, it seems to me that a physical meeting is very important. You may have dating apps and you may even get betrothed, but for cross-South Asian activism, a dating app is not enough. I'm using that apocryphally, of course. What I mean is to feel, you have to be in Kathmandu to meet a friend from Pakistan and to exercise excitement to plan something together. Meaning not Dubai, but Kathmandu. But then sadly, there's no direct flight anymore from Pakistan to Nepal. So they have to go to Dubai anyway to come to Nepal. But I think, so my answer would be this, that it's helping people get information, and those people who are searchers and seekers, everything is out there. But for them to then take the next step, it's harder to be an activist online for a cause. So I think that is one. The other one is this, and I did critique the academics, particularly academics in the political sciences and so-called international relations arena, IR as they call it. We have not gone, and this would be something I would suggest to the Jindal Institute as well, if I may. What has happened is, for people like you and others, may there be hundreds of thousands. I always use hundreds of thousands as a minimal figure for South Asia, right? There is no ontology presented for South Asia or a conceptualization. The scholars have run away. The great scholars that you read on the Indian Express or Scroll or India Today or wherever, they will not touch the idea of South Asia, even though for me, the future of this region, this continent requires South Asia as a concept to be accepted as a parallel to nation states and local government, nation states, but the theorizing has not happened. So I believe that there is a need for unabashed scholars, perhaps such as you, to be moving ahead into this arena.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Rajni Chavda, and I live and work in Bhutan. I'm not Bhutanese, but I've lived there more than 40 years. My question, and I'm sort of further on from what you've said, is do you think there is a future for neighboring areas of the smaller countries to dialogue and maybe end up in cooperation rather than the nation states and Delhi and Kathmandu or Delhi and Colombo?
Yeah, I think firstly we must plan for the moment you are from a capital, and I'm also from a capital, even though I claim to be from Patan and not Kathmandu, but it's the same valley. The moment you are locked into a capital mindset, it's very hard to think regionally. So always, Calcutta is more regional, Bombay and Chennai more than Delhi will ever be. So if anything, to rescue South Asia from the clutches of Delhi, Kathmandu, Islamabad, Colombo. So I suggest you've made, from your base in Bhutan, let's take that as a case in point. Bhutan, besides its environmental activism, the way it has, because Bhutan has a particular history and it was able to do a lot of preservation activities of old structures and old designs, some of which we see out there with the hospital in particular, I believe. And I think that kind of design in Bhutan for that elevation would probably work for Sikkim as well as for Arunachal and parts of Nepal as well. So there must be such what you would call sub-regional interactions. There are some geopolitics that come in the way, where people then feel that, oh, if you're working in Bhutan now, because Nepal and Bhutan, have been a bit distanced in the last 2-3 decades. But we should learn to compartmentalize. And so let us work on architecture together. And that's a great idea. I take it. Bhutan architecture to be shared with Arunachalis, Sikkimis, and Nepalis, and Arunachali architecture with Nepalis.
So before I say goodbye to everyone, Rahul.
No, I just had one comment which just picks up on what Rajni said, but things you implicitly said, and the provocation of this map, because I wish the water was going down like this in the way your map seems to imply, because I think the climate emergency, and to go to Rajni's point, is how do we also not think pan South Asia, but look at adjacencies, correct? And I think the climate emergency might be the meta narrative within which architects can construct other forms of action, because I think that is going to spell the largest disasters and challenges the Indo-Gangetic Plain with 300 million people living there is going to depend on what happens in Nepal, the brown cloud, etc. So I think the shift in terms of discipline to looking at the climate emergency to construct the narrative which tells us how we act might be a useful way to frame it.
What I think is perhaps the way to go around what you're suggesting, Rahul, is for people outside the geopolitical disciplines to take up the matter. Because we've just had COP in Dubai, and right now, sad to say, I do not think the political leadership of South Asia is at all keen, because they are looking this far. They're not even looking this far. And so they're not keen. There should be an upwelling. Otherwise, it's a theoretical thing that so many 100 million will be displaced from the ocean regions, particularly the Indo-Gangetic Delta, probably 40-50 million displaced. Where will they come? The concertina wire in the India-Pakistan border is not going to stop them. They're going to come across. India will have a huge problem in its hands. Should we do something about it? Well, let me tell you what's happened with SARC. That's the one elephant in the room we have not talked about. And let me just end with my talk. SARC and South Asia should not be seen as synonyms. But what happens to SARC will indicate where the idea of South Asia is. Why, therefore, we need to go look beyond SARC and work on an ontology for South Asia. Shiv Vishwanathan and I work, in fact, that ontology is his word. I'm not a scholar. I don't really even understand it now, as I mentioned it to you. But the conceptualization exercise is required, because SARC, in 2015, when the last SARC summit happened, Mr. Modi, in his speech, said, and I know this word for word, it shall be either some of us, it shall be either all of us or some of us. Meaning, if Pakistan doesn't go along with us, then we'll go with the others. So BIMSTEC was tried, BBIN was tried. I won't even tell you what the acronyms signify, but other sub-regional efforts were tried out. They're also, if I might use the term, dead in the water. In the end, you cannot not have Pakistan on board. And we must learn to differentiate between, and this is the biggest challenge for South Asia, is the animosity between New Delhi and Islamabad. So what we must try to do is differentiate between the people of Pakistan and the state of Pakistan. This demonizing of the people of Pakistan, who are like the rest of us, any one of us, that is at the core of the problem, where even the scholars dare not speak. So we have to think about SARC should remain alive, but we must work on South Asia. And we must work on South Asia. If the demand comes from elsewhere, then even the geostrategists might get a little embarrassed. So this might be a topic we need to look at.
Mr. Dixit, thank you so much. Thank you. I think that is the very definition of a keynote, in the sense that it struck all the notes we're trying to strike in this conference, including some perhaps depressing ones. But there are 2 more days, for us to think about these things. Thank you very much. I also want to emphasize, we keep coming up to this South Asia, and as I said in my introduction, the Mittal Institute as a group is very is very much committed to thinking of South Asia. We are a South Asia without partitioned hearts institute, and we're very excited to be part of this gathering. And I just wanted to say, because of course nothing South Asian can end without some kind of Mahakavya or poem. As you were speaking, something occurred to me, because the essential problem that you laid out is, how do we get policymakers, the common public, to see the world in a different way, to ask for different kinds of beauty and organization, which is what would drive everything on the scale that you're talking about. And for that, there is a beautiful line from Khalib, Hazar saal roi nargis apni benuri pe, badi mushkil se hota hai chaman mein deedavar paida. So maybe we can dedicate ourselves to producing deedavars, which will change the world. Thank you. Please join us again at 9:30 sharp tomorrow. As you have noticed, Rahul, besides being a brilliant scholar and architect, is very good at keeping on time. So we will start at 9:30.